Thank you for being here this morning. This is a talk today based on a song by Bob Dylan called Blowing in the Wind. Great tune, a great melody, and easy to sing and easy to remember. I remember when, not exactly when, but I remember when I first heard it and thought, oh, this is a good one. This has to be added to, I have to learn this and add this to the songs that I sing in Christian Youth Fellowship or wherever I might play guitar. And I did, along with Michael Boat Ashore and so many others at the time. Why is that song so universally accepted? You know, it's been translated into almost every language and everyone likes the idea behind it. I think it's because it speaks to something that goes deeper and beyond just the surface level that many tunes and songs, especially at that time in history, were on. You know, rather than singing "It's My Party" and "I'll Cry If I Want to" and that sort of thing that was also going on. We've got this song called "Blowing in the Wind" that is speaking of something that is universal and something that we all need to sit and ponder and think about. The very first lyric that comes out of that song speaks of peace. The very first idea that comes along, the white dove sailing, is about peace. When will she be able to rest? When will this actually take root and be part of the world that we live in? But then it goes deeper into that. It goes into social consciousness. How many times can we see something and just turn the other way and not really do anything about it? How many times can we look to the sky and not see it, not get it, not get that there is something above us and beautiful and is all around us, and we just stay in our humdrum world and don't pay attention to any of that, as though it's just going to go on and on being this way. But he speaks to that as well in this song when he says, how long can a mountain exist before it's washed to the sea? That speaks not only of the world, the physical world, but it also speaks of the political world. How long can something exist, a power structure stay in place, until finally it's just worn down, until it washes to the sea? All of these are great things to ponder. But the really cryptic thing that he says in this is that the answer is blowing in the wind. What on earth does that mean? I know that somehow on a deep innate level we know what that means, because each one of us picked up on that idea and we said, yeah, blowing in the wind. One thing it means is that it's present. It's right here. You know, he wrote other songs about this. The times they are a-changing. A hard rain's gonna fall. Other songs that this man, Bob Dylan, wrote. Now here's the funny thing about him. He's one of our contemporaries. He's not some ancient speaker of proverbs or a person who would tell us different things about the future. He's one of our contemporaries. He was born as Robert Zimmerman in Duluth, Minnesota. And then when his father actually contracted polio, he moved the family back to his mother's home in Hibbing, Minnesota. You'd think a small little town like Hibbing, Minnesota, is just a little crossroads on the way to somewhere. From nowhere to something else. I'm not sure where Hibbing, Minnesota even is. You'd think, how can that produce some wonderful thinker like this? Wouldn't it be someplace like New York or Paris or London or San Francisco? How odd that somebody could be produced at that age in 1941. Well, he grew up there in Hibbing, and he played in a band, his very first rock and roll band. He was actually a rock and roll singer, if you can believe that, but I guess all he had to do was just shout, and everything was understood completely. And it said that he had this band called the Golden Chords, C-H-O-R-D-S, the Golden Chords. That was his first band. And he went by a different name. He didn't even go by his name even then. He went by some silly name. And he decided that he would play for his high school assembly with his band. And they were playing some song, I think it was a Little Richard song, and they were screaming this song out at everyone, and the principal walked over and unplugged the microphone because it was just too loud. He couldn't stand it. Not long after he graduated from high school, he went to college, and there in college he stayed for 1 year and realized this isn't for me, and moved to New York City, where he, by this time, had given up on rock and roll and had gone into the folk era and was just absolutely in love with folk music. Folk and protest music, and music about the people, and music about labor and this sort of thing, about things that needed to be changed in our country or in our society. He was completely enamored of and followed Woody Guthrie. Woody Guthrie, who was a singer of songs about unionism and changes that needed to come in the country. One of my favorite songs of Woody Guthrie is a song called Do Re Mi. It says, "California is a garden of Eden, a wonderland to live in or see. But believe it or not, it ain't very hot if you don't have the Do Re Mi." Isn't that a great line? And it's so true. I mean, he wrote many songs. This land is your land, this land is my land. And Dylan, by this time he changed his name to Bob Dylan. Why? Because he was also an aficionado of poetry. You can tell that by the lyrics that he wrote. And so he named himself after Dylan Thomas, the great poet. So he became Bob Dylan, and he stayed as Bob Dylan for the rest of his career. Although sometimes he would play harmonica or piano or clap or something on someone else's record, and then he would give himself a different name. And so he could do this. Why? Because he was under contract as Bob Dylan to only do his own records exclusively as an artist. So he would just take a pseudonym and do this on the side for his friends. One of his friends that he did this with was Joan Baez. Another one was Ramblin' Jack Elliott, Dave Van Ronk. Many of these names probably conjure up memories or vague sort of memories in your mind of songs from that day. He was a great friend of Pete Seeger, who also wrote many, many songs about the condition of the world and society. Here's the wonderful thing about this one song, Blowing in the Wind. It's as relevant today as ever before when it was written. It's an amazing song. The reason it is, though, is because it does fall into the same genre as the great prophets in the Bible, or the great writers like Shakespeare. It's there for us to see. It's there for us to hold on to, because these truths that he's speaking of have not changed. How long will it take for the mountain to crumble into the sea? How long will it take before a person no longer turns his head and does see what's around him? Now, I'm as guilty as anyone else. I see people holding signs on the side of the highway, and I make a choice. Do I help them today, or do I stare straight ahead? I'm as guilty as anyone else. I make these choices. All these thoughts come up in my mind, but my heart says, look, see, help, do something. But then the other part of me says, are you helping or are you enabling? Which are you doing? And I make the choice on that given moment in my heart on that day. I'm not sure, but can anyone relate to the idea that that happens to them also? Some of us may even have this thing of saying, I've got a rule, I don't do it at all. Others may have a rule that says, I keep some change in a little place, and every time I see one of them, I give him something like that. So it all depends. But the point I'm trying to make is that he is awakening in us a piece of our consciousness that is universal. He is just like we are, except he is aware. And his job that he took on in life, this man, Bob Dylan, was to write down his thoughts, as obscure sometimes as they may appear to us. He writes them down in a way that touches us. That's very important, very important. So, he's speaking for us, and he's speaking to us. Speaking to us. Now, in some ways, he's very much like another young Jewish boy from a very obscure little town. He's very much the same. He's speaking to our hearts and speaking to our souls. In that song, Blowing in the Wind, he touches on things that are personal to us, things that are global to us, and things that are spiritual to us. He touches on all these things. You know that one line, that one little couplet in there where he says, how many times must a man look up until he can see the sky? How many ears must one man have? When he's speaking of this is the same as when Jesus is saying, have you not eyes to see? Have you not ears to hear? He borrowed that idea. Bob Dylan borrowed that idea. In doing some research on this, I found out that he's borrowed many, many times from Shakespeare. He's borrowed from Faulkner. He's borrowed from Hemingway. He's borrowed from Eliot. He's borrowed also from Isaiah. He did this because he is a voracious reader and a voracious gatherer of knowledge. Even today, he's still writing. He's been doing this now for 6 decades, almost 6 decades. That's quite amazing. Now, some of you may have listened to him at the first, like I did, and laughed when you heard his voice. I just laughed like crazy when I first heard him. I went over to this friend of mine's house, and he said, listen to this guy. And he dropped the needle down, and this guy started singing, and I thought, that's singing? I laughed. And he said, no, listen. And I started listening to the words, and I realized pretty quickly on that actually this is the perfect vehicle for this kind of lyric. Because if he sang too grandly, I wouldn't listen to his words. I'd just be following along with the melody and humming like I was doing in Vaughn Monroe and everybody else that was singing at the time. Vaughn Monroe, where did I pull that? Okay, Bobby V. Okay. The point I'm trying to make is that because he used this style of voice, we listen to the words. You know that's still alive today? That idea is still alive today? It is said that he was the precursor, or he is one of the beginners of hip-hop and rap music. Because the idea that hip-hop and rap music about it is don't let the melody get in the way of the words, of the lyrics. And so just eliminate the melody and just have somebody reading their poetry. Now you may not like what they're saying, but you can hear it, and you can realize that it took some clever thinking to put these words together a certain way. Dylan was doing the same thing. In his great song called Like a Rolling Stone, he uses a false rhyme where he says something about getting used to it, and then his false rhyme for that, very much like hip-hop, is juiced in it. Now, just those kind of ideas. He was breaking molds. He was changing the way that we looked at things so that we would listen to the content of the lyric and not the form of the music necessarily. You know, there have been those who don't like him, never have, and never will. You know, that's their loss because he's a great, great contemporary songwriter of our time. So, not just a songwriter, a great, great person of literature. Yes, it's not the finest literature in the world, but it speaks to us and grabs us. There are some now today, since he was honored with the Nobel Prize for Literature, who are scoffing and saying he shouldn't be awarded this. I disagree with that. I disagree with that because his lyrics and his songs have changed my life. Just as the writings of Kurt Vonnegut and so many other great writers have also changed and formed my life. Now, not many people can do that. by writing words on paper. He's one of them. He's one of them. So today we honor another Jewish boy from an obscure start in life. Someone that you would never think possible that could accomplish all that he has accomplished. Somebody who is seen as being crazy to some, as was his long ago predecessor. We can see all of this, and we see the changes that he has made on our contemporary society and will so for years to come. The answers that we're looking for are blowing in the wind. Now let's talk about that just a moment before I close. You know, I said it's a very cryptic phrase to say the answer is blowing in the wind. That can mean on a spiritual sense that it's blowing within yourself. It's here. The answer is within you. It's there in your spirit, awaiting to emerge. It can also mean that it's contemporaneous and all around us and getting ready to happen at any moment. It's beginning to form, very much like the idea of the 100th monkey, that whole thing of once consciousness, once collective consciousness builds to a certain degree, boom, it happens, whatever it might be in life. The same thing is occurring right now in our society. You know, we have one particular candidate who a lot of people are just saying, oh gosh, I can't believe that guy can even run for president. And others are saying about the other one, oh gosh, I can't believe she can even run for president. Actually, this is a time of goodness, in my view, because it's bringing out of the shadows and bringing to the surface so many things that are not necessarily pretty to see in the light of day, but it's bringing them to the light. And what happens when something is brought to the light? It either exists as light or it dissolves into nothingness. Won't it be nice when a man is called a man, when a woman is called a woman on an equal status? Won't it be great when we're able to change our way of thinking, not so that it just is only a movement, but a statement that lasts for us, that becomes fabric, part of the fabric of who we are, collectively and individually. It takes people like little Bobby Zimmerman to change that for us. You know, it's pretty brave to be able to write these things down so that all the rest of the world can see them and hear them. He's been run out of places, you know, booed and run off the stage because people either didn't like what he had to say in a more warmongering time, or they didn't like the type of music he was playing because he went from traditional folk music, acoustic, to electrical music. Whatever the reasoning behind it, he stayed with it. He didn't quit. He continued on. That's for us to do too, because that answer that's blowing in the wind is blowing right here within us. It's ours to bring that forth, to find others of like mind, and to stand together. To stand together in a way that says the world can be as we see it. The world can be as we imagine it. The world can. That mountain that stands in the way can be washed to the sea, and the white dove can finally rest in the sand.